The signal came at 0300 hours, station time. Maya Velshera, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Alliance, stood at the center of the war room aboard the flagship Eternal Covenant and watched 37 alien species make the same decision simultaneously. They ran, not in chaos. That was the worst part. It was organized, coordinated. The Drenkai pulled their fleets back first, citing strategic redeployment. The Veth followed within minutes, their official transmission using the phrase tactical reassessment. The Sulhari didn't even bother with language. Their ships simply jumped to FTL and disappeared from the sensor grid like candles being blown out one by one. In 11 minutes, the Galactic Alliance, 2,000 years of interstellar cooperation, of treaties and shared doctrine and collective defense, evaporated. What remained was a single fleet. Human. Maya had served alongside humans for 19 years. She respected them, in the way one respects something powerful and slightly unpredictable, the way you respect a river that has flooded before and will flood again. She had negotiated with their diplomats, eaten their food, learned 30 words of their English. She had attended the funeral of a human admiral she had genuinely admired. She had never, until this moment, stood in a room with one and felt something she could only describe as relief. Fleet Commander Lucas Hale was not what the Alliance's cultural files suggested a human military leader should look like. He was somewhere past middle age, with gray at his temples and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw that he had never had corrected. He wore his uniform the way someone wears a second skin, naturally, without thought. He was reading the tactical display when Maya entered the war room, and he did not look up immediately. "They left," Maya said. "I noticed." He highlighted a section of the sensor grid. The Drenkai took their supply depots with them. "Thorough. Commander Hale." "Lucas." He looked up then. His eyes were steady. "Dark. You're about to apologize." "Don't. It won't change the math." Maya stopped. "The math. We have what's left. 61 human vessels. The Archangel, the Stalingrad, for carrier groups, and whatever the Ninth Fleet brought before they got here." He turned back to the display. "Against what's on the other side of that relay point, it's not good math." "Then why are you still here?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. He reached out and adjusted the scale on the tactical map, pulling back to show the full scope of what was coming. The Void Armada, a force so overwhelming that the Alliance's combined analysts had simply labeled it Extinction Class and stopped trying to quantify it further. "Because someone has to be," he said. The Void Armada crossed the relay point at 0600. Maya watched from the Eternal Covenant's secondary bridge. Lucas had given her access, but not responsibility, which she understood was its own kind of mercy. She was a symbol now, a witness, the last senior officer of an alliance that no longer existed in any meaningful sense. What she watched made her understand, for the first time, why the others had run. The Void didn't communicate. It didn't negotiate or send terms or demand surrender. It had done these things to 32 civilizations before humanity had reached space, and those civilizations were now memory and debris. The Void simply came, like weather, like geology, like the universe's own indifference made mobile and armed. The human fleet moved to meet it. Maya had seen naval engagements. She had a doctorate in military history and had studied the great battles of a dozen species. She knew what a defensive engagement looked like, the tight formations, the overlapping fields of fire, the careful conservation of assets. Lucas Hale did not fight defensively. The human fleet hit the Void's advanced formation like a thrown fist. Not a line, not a formation. A concentrated strike aimed at the Armada's command cluster, identified by the Ninth Fleet's Intelligence Division in the 7 minutes between the Armada's emergence and the engagement beginning. 7 minutes of analysis. 7 minutes to find the single point that mattered most. The Void had not expected aggression. This, Maya would later understand, was the thing that every species, including the ones now fleeing at FDL, had failed to properly account for. They had all modeled the humans as defenders, reactive, capable of violence, but ultimately shaped by survival instinct. They had forgotten that human military history was not a history of waiting. It was a history of closing the distance. The first hour was brutal. The Jakarta took a spinal hit and lost propulsion, but kept firing. The Rostov lost its command section, and its executive officer took control from engineering. 3 destroyers, the Needle, the Meridian, and the Cold Harbor, formed a triangular screen around a damaged carrier and held it for 40 minutes against a force 20 times their size. The Cold Harbor didn't survive. She broke apart at the 43-minute mark, her reactor going critical in a bloom of light that the sensors registered for 0.3 seconds before being overwhelmed. Maya watched Lucas's face when the Cold Harbor disappeared from the display. He closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he issued 3 new orders and moved on. She had seen generals grieve before. She had never seen grief weaponized, compressed, stored, converted into forward momentum. She had not known that was possible until she watched Lucas Hale do it in real time. "You're thinking about them," she said quietly, when the immediate crisis had shifted. "Always," he said. "That's the job. How do you keep moving?" He looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully read, not cold, but deeply, deliberately contained. "Because stopping doesn't bring them back. And there are still people I can keep alive if I don't stop." At hour 3, something changed. The Void Armada's advance slowed. It was subtle at first, a fractional reduction in closing speed, a shift in formation geometry that the Archangel's tactical AI flagged as anomalous. Lucas saw it before the AI finished its analysis. "They're recalculating," he said. "Recalculating what?" Maya asked. "Their model of us." He allowed himself something that was almost a smile. "They've never fought humans before. They came in with assumptions. We're not matching their assumptions." What did they assume? Same thing everyone assumes. He pulled up the Void's formation shift on the display. That at some point, we'd recognize we were losing and adjust our behavior accordingly. Maya stared at the display. At 61 human ships against an extinction-class armada. At the Jakarta, still firing with no propulsion. At the Ninth Fleet's carriers launching their last wave of fighters with the methodical efficiency of people who had accepted what was happening and chosen to matter anyway. "You're not losing," she said slowly. "You're bleeding them. Every minute we hold, the refugee convoys get further away." Lucas marked 3 points on the tactical grid. "Every ship they lose reconfigures their advanced timeline. We don't have to beat them, Admiral. We have to cost them enough that the math changes." Maya was quiet. She thought about 37 species making the calculation that survival meant retreat. The rational calculation. The correct calculation by every model she knew. She thought about a species whose history was written in the space between we should retreat and we didn't. At hour 6, the Void Armada stopped. Not a pause, not a tactical reposition, a full cessation of forward movement. The bridge of the Eternal Covenant went very still. Lucas studied the readings for a long moment. His expression gave nothing away. "Commander," his tactical officer said carefully. "They're holding position. We're reading internal communication bursts. Heavy traffic. Something's happening in their command structure." Maya looked at Lucas. "What does this mean?" "It means their model broke," he said. "They ran a projection. Fed in our behavior, our casualty tolerance, our rates of fire, our damage to withdrawal ratios." He turned to face her fully. "And the projection told them something they've never seen before." "Which is?" Lucas looked at the display. At his battered fleet. At the Jakarta, still holding. At the Archangel, scarred down one full flank, launching her 3rd fighter wing of the engagement. "That we don't have a threshold," he said quietly. "They've fought 32 civilizations. Every single one had a breaking point. A percentage of losses where the math shifts and the species chooses to survive rather than fight. They know how to find that number. They build their entire strategy around it." He looked at Maya. "They can't find ours." The Void Armada withdrew at hour 7. Not a retreat. They would return, better prepared, with new models and adjusted strategy. Lucas was honest about this in his report. He did not claim victory. But in the refugee corridors 40 light-years away, 3 billion beings from 37 species were still alive. Maya Velshera stood on the bridge of the Eternal Covenant and watched the Void signatures fade from the sensor grid. Around her, what remained of the human fleet held its position, battered, depleted, present. She thought about the question she had asked at the beginning. "Why are you still here?" She understood now that it wasn't a military answer. It wasn't strategy or calculation or the cold logic of acceptable loss. It was something older than that. Something written into this species at a level below reason. Someone had to hold the line. So they held it. She opened a channel to Lucas Hale. "Commander," she said, "when the Alliance reconvenes, and it will reconvene, I will tell them what happened here. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Tell them we need a better plan for next time. I'll tell them, Maya said carefully, that they left too early. A pause. Then something in his voice that might, if you listen very closely, have been the specific kind of exhausted warmth that only exists on the other side of surviving something. Yeah, Lucas said. They did.